So tell us a little bit about yourself, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Bohannon from Angleton, Texas. Former crop duster, glider pilot, banner tower, aerobatic pilot, air racer, record setter. It's obvious I can't hold down a real job.
All right. And how long have you had your Legend Cub?
We've had the Legend Cub 4.5 years now, and absolutely love it. I've owned 3 J3s prior to this, and the first time I flew the Legend Cub, it flew different enough that I went, I don't think it's as good as a J3, but after 50 hours in it, I flew another J3 and it flew terrible, comparatively speaking. The airplane's lighter on the control pressures. It just took a little getting used to. It was just different. It's not worse or better, it's just different, but once you get used to it, it is absolutely beautiful.
And you use your Legend Cub for training?
Yes, we bought the airplane. What started us out for the Legend Cub was both of my kids learned to fly, and had them fly in a J3, and watching them fly around in a 60-year-old airplane with 60-year-old tubing that you can't see inside, that was probably the biggest driving force into getting the Legend Cub.
Okay, and how do you like the Legend for training?
I think the Legend Cub is probably the best trainer ever built. It's great for the student in that he's in the front of the airplane. It lets them learn quicker than if they were in the back and couldn't see around the nose. It also is a confidence-inspiring thing for the student to not see the instructor. I'm just a voice in their head sitting behind them. The fact that it's got doors on both sides and windows that we can fly. We're in South Texas where it's just hotter than all get out in the summertime. It's a very comfortable airplane compared to anything that's closed cockpit. And the handling qualities are excellent. The visibility is excellent for the student. It's got good brakes that are highly necessary in a trainer to have good brakes. J3s, you were just a passenger in a J3 with somebody in the back seat with their legs straight out. They could overpower you real easily. Even somebody much smaller than me could overpower me on the rudder pedals. So it came down to brakes, and the Legend's got excellent brakes, as well as I'm in the back with my legs straighter out, and so therefore I've got control of the airplane when I'm in it.
Okay, and what sort of a classroom does it make? How comfortable are you in the back of the airplane every day?
Well, it's just wonderful. We've put 1,450 hours on the airplane in 4.5 years, and really only been training in it the last 3 years, so most of that came in the last 3 years. And to me, there's not a more comfortable trainer. It's just, like I said, in the summertime, you just can't beat it for the ventilation. While everybody else is just sweating themselves silly, we're comfortable in the airplane.
Okay. So why does this make a great classroom, Bruce?
Well, the Legend Cub is excellent for the student as well as the instructor. The student has just tremendous visibility and the feel of flying by themselves the whole time they're learning to fly. So when you get out, there's a CG change that we've already got it figured out how many turns of trim you put in the airplane so that it mimics it. The feel is the same whether I'm in there or not. And they're already used to the visual of flying the airplane by themselves from the day they begin. As far as the instructor is concerned, the airplane is so much more comfortable than a Cub. I'm sitting in the back seat. It's a large airplane. It's much wider than the Cub. You're in the shade. The low-wing airplanes with a canopy over them are just awfully hot in the summertime. I have more control in this airplane over what a student can do because the person in the back seats, their legs are straighter out, which gives them much more leverage on the rudder pedals. If somebody locks up on the controls, which every once in a while you'll have somebody do, when they get scared, they just lock up. Well, I can easily overpower them just because of the angle of my legs versus theirs.
What have your graduates from your pilot school done? What sort of airplanes have they gone on to fly?
We've graduated quite a few people. Probably 10 to 15 private pilots in the airplane, many light sport pilots. One of the light sport guys went straight into a Luscombe. One went straight into a Taylor craft. Several of my private pilots, at 50 hours total time, most of the people are getting their license in 40 to 45 hours. And at 50 hours, 2 different students have gone on to fly RV4s, and they've now got about 100 hours each in their RV4s with no incidents. So the Cub is probably the best trainer you can fly if you're going to fly any other tail dragger, because the wing loading is so light. The airplane demands that you do everything correctly. Every crosswind, every bump in the air demands your attention, and it teaches the student really good skills.
Okay, Bruce, I understand you did a bit of air racing and crop dusting. How long have you been flying?
Well, I learned to fly in 1976, but I had grown up on a crop dusting strip. Went to work there when I was 12, so I had a lot of influence from a lot of the old guys. You know, it was a different environment back then. Guys that just were grizzly and flew airplanes for a living in hard conditions, and all I wanted to be was a crop duster. And by the time I was 18, I was flying a Cessna ag truck for a living, and I did that for the next, probably 10 years. About maybe 4,000 hours of crop dusting, and ended up in Angleton, Texas, flying an ag cat for Bob Garrett. And while I was there, I bought my first project pits, and I'd been flying aerobatics also with all the guys at the original airport I worked at. We flew a lot of aerobatics there, and so I built the pits and started flying that. That led me into flying local air shows. Went on to fly competition in a factory-built Pitts S1. Did that for a while, and I really got tired of the judges, you know, not agreeing on how good a maneuver was. And somewhere in the mid-'80s, I went out to the Reno air races just to go with some friends. And the one thing I took away from the air races was that everybody knew who won. There wasn't any judges, unless you cut a pylon. All you had to do is stay outside of the pylon. So that intrigued me. So I had a new baby at home, and I was a stay-at-home Mr. Mom, and found out that the baby wasn't really that much trouble. So I decided to get into air racing, built an airplane, went to Jim Miller and contracted with him to help me build Pushy Galore. We raced Pushy from 1989 and we retired it in 98. She wasn't a real successful race plane. We never won a race with the airplane. The pusher propeller just wasn't conducive to the high top speeds necessary to win in Formula One, but we did find out that it was pretty clean and it would climb pretty good. And, after watching my buddy Hoot Gibson set a world record in his Cassett racer, I knew mine was better than his, so that led us to try our first world record. We were sponsored by Shell Oil Company at the time, so it was important that we find something to do with the airplane, since it wasn't a very good race plane. So we started setting records just as a matter of keeping our sponsorship and delivering something in return for our sponsorship money. And we eventually I set 5 world records in the airplane, all the time to climb records in class C1A, 3,000, 6,000, and 9,000 meters. And for those of you who don't know what meters are, that's 30,000 feet in an O200 powered airplane. So it was quite spectacular, the rate of climb it would achieve as well as how high it would go. We eventually got the airplane to 33,460 feet, using a nitrous oxide boost system on the airplane to get it that high. After we retired Pushy Galore, we built the Flying Tiger under contract with Exxon to do basically the same thing for them that we'd done for Shell, and that was advertise a new product called Exxon Elite. And the difference between the two is the Pushy Galore was designed and built as a race plane that we went on and set world records with. With the Tiger, we realized that the world records were more valuable to us than anything else, so we built it specifically for setting records. And the history books are kind to us because it shows that we had the right idea. We just took a good airplane to begin with, which was an RV4 basic airframe, and modified it in many ways to keep it as light as possible, get the most horsepower possible, and we ended up setting 30 world records with that airplane, 18 in class C1B and 12 in the unlimited class. It's the fastest climbing piston airplane in history to 6,000, 9,000, and to 12,000 meters, which is right at 40,000 feet. We also hold the altitude and horizontal flight record at 46,900 some odd feet, and the absolute altitude in class C1B at 47,000 67 feet. We achieved a higher flight later on, but it wasn't high enough to break our existing record. And that one we verified, we got to 47,530 feet. So that was the highest we ever flew the airplane. It's now retired, sitting in my hangar waiting on somebody to buy it and donate it to a museum. Over all of those years, I always enjoyed teaching people to fly tail draggers, and I owned several J3 Cubs and checked out innumerable people in the Cubs. But when I had my two sons, both of them started showing interest in flying. My youngest actually took it up first, and he soloed the Cub as early as you can. While I was watching him fly it around on his first solo flight, it really dawned on me that, you know, we've got a 60-year-old airplane here with my kid in it. And when the opportunity presented itself, a partner came along wanting to buy a Legend Cub. I sold my J3 immediately and bought the Legend Cub, and we've never looked back. Probably the best decision I ever made, being as I went on to become a CFI and teach primary flying as well as tailwheel checkouts and emergency training. I still teach aerobatics. We've got a Pitts S2B that's owned by an airline pilot. The lady's got a Mooney and the Pitts S2B that she lets me use in our flight school. So we do our night and instrument training in the Mooney. My students come out with a tailwheel endorsement, a complex endorsement, and once they graduate and get their license, they go up in the pits and we give them a high performance endorsement in that.
That's pretty good. High performance endorsement in the pits.
Yep.
All right. So when you got your Legend, what were the things that you first noticed about that made it suitable?
Well, the first and foremost was the comfort of the airplane. I just couldn't sit in a J3 Cub all day long like I can in this. I've got much more surface area on the seat. I'm kind of skinny, and the Cubs always ended up just hurting all day if I flew the airplane all day. I've spent 6 and 7 hours a day in this airplane at times, and I'm very comfortable in it. The ventilation, having a door on both sides, you wouldn't think that a J3 Cub could be hot because it's got a window that opens on one side and a door on the other, but the difference in the amount of air that circulates through the Legend Cub is just fantastic. And keeping people cool really helps with air sickness problems. I've never had anyone even complain about air sickness. Just one of the huge benefits of having the doors on both sides is the amount of air that you get through the airplane. If you can keep somebody cool in the airplane, even the most nervous person, if you can keep enough air on them, they won't tend to get air sick. And I've never had anyone complain at all of air sickness in the Legend Cub. And that's a big plus for training. It's a big plus for just taking people rides. FlyingTiger.net, FLYINTIGER.net.
If you want to learn to fly with you, Bruce, where do people find out about you?
Well, I'm based in Angleton, Texas, which is about 30 miles south of Houston. We're outside of the Class B airspace. We have our own strip. So it's a really private area where you can come learn to fly, and generally we're the only one in the pattern. So we fly 500-foot patterns and get the airplane around quick and teach landings. That's the main thing that's different about these airplanes than a tricycle gear is the landing characteristics. So I'm a firm believer in lots and lots of landings. You can reach me at 281-889-8078.
So how would you sum up having a Legend Cub in a flight school?
Well, I believe the Legend Cub is probably the most valuable tool a flight school could put in their arsenal. That combined with a good instructor that can keep the airplane on the runway and let a student make as many mistakes as possible so they learn from their mistakes. But once they've mastered this airplane, those skills will stay with them forever, and it will make them a better pilot in whatever they fly. It'll also make them a much more versatile pilot. It just opens up a world of really good airplanes that they can go fly. And the transition from the Legend Cub to any other tail dragger is logical. This airplane has all of the characteristics that you need in a good trainer.
So what does the FAA think of your students when they come to graduate, get their test?
We have a DPE that is a tail dragger pilot, obviously, because he flies with our students. And the one thing that he's been awfully complimentary of is how well the students fly. Part of that is the way I teach. Part of it is the airplane itself. If you can fly a tailwheel aircraft, it's like learning to drive in a standard in an automobile. If you learn to drive in a standard, somebody can give you an automatic and tell you how to drive it and send you on your way. But you can't do it the other way around. The same is true for tailwheel versus tricycle. If you can fly a tailwheel airplane well, you can fly a tail dragger as well as a tricycle gear. The handling characteristics of the tricycle are so easy that if you can hit the runway, you can keep it on it. That's not true with a tail dragger. The technique that I use is we spend about 2 hours teaching people the basics of how to climb, turn, descend, hold an airspeed, hold an altitude. And we do that the first 2 hours. And I let them know, you're not going to know how to do that in 2 hours. But what we're going to do is let you learn how to do that in the traffic pattern. And we start shooting landings, and we shoot landings through about 10 hours. And that's where most people are soloing, in 10 to 15 hours. I've had some much quicker than that. I've had some that took 20 hours. I've had one that took 20 hours. So 10 to 15 hours is certainly average, and they've got hundreds of landings by the time they get their license with me. And the DPE that we use is very complimentary of the fact that these people can fly an airplane. You can't send somebody out solo in a tail dragger aircraft on a short grass strip unless they can fly it well. And so far, we have had no incidents with a student in this airplane. Knock on wood.